Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. These are two flies from Fran Betters. You owned a fly shop in the Adirondacks. Fished the AuSable up there. He was a well-known fly innovator, fisherman. Um, Fly shop there. Knew the waters like the back of his hand. Uh, but a couple of the flies, his innovations were before comparadons or sparkledons were developed. He already had a pattern called the haystack out, which was deer hair wing, fur body, and a deer hair tail. The wing was splayed at 180 degrees, which I still to this day feel that this was a copy from Cucci and Nasasi, copied it and then modified it to make it a little better. As we see tyers will change something here and there to make it and fit their own needs. And then Greg Matthews replaced the tail, which was a microfibets or moose, sometimes even moose hair, um, with a antron yarn for a trailing shock. So things. This is how the haystack, what it evolved into other patterns. Fran Betters was also a comedian. First fly I'm going to show, it's only made with one material, uh, and it was snowshoe rabbit. And he used snowshoe rabbit was something amazing. It's these fibers on here, the fur, was to keep the rabbit above the snow. And and so what he did was he took the hair from the bottom and used that as the wing and tail for this next fly, which he called the usual. And the usual, when he was fishing and catching fish, uh, he would turn around and people would ask him, "What are you using?" He goes, just the usual." So that's the kind of comedian that he was, always looking for a laugh uh, and drive people crazy. Also, using that material ended up being some emergers. You could have used snowshoe rabbit as a wing for emergers before CDC started to become popular. So that was a really good starting point. So with that, I'm going to do the usual, tie the usual up, and we'll get going. This is the usual that's in the vise right now. It's a simple pattern, as I said. Snowshoe rabbit wing, splayed at 180 degrees. Snowshoe rabbit tail, and this is the underfur from the snowshoe rabbit, tied in a yellow, in a bright orange color, so that when the fur got wet, the red or orange fur thread would show through, giving it a different color, not just the cream color underfur from the rabbit. And I'm tying this on a size 12 dry fly hook. Tie right behind the eye. Put a little extra fur, and we will go for the 2/3 mark, or 1/3 away from the eye. Here's the snowshoe rabbit. Here's where its nails are. So I look for a spot on here. Right about here. I'm going to grab it there. I'm going to cut it right to the bottom of that foot. And then I'm going to hold the tips, and this underfur is what I'm going to use for the body. So I'm holding it by the tips of the rabbit hair, and now I'm going to measure this on the shank of the hook. Got the tips. Now line it, measure it, make sure that that is the length of the hook, because the wing is supposed to be the length of the hook. I'm measuring it, check it, bring it over to the tie-in point. Make sure it stays on top of the hook. Really crank that in now. Lift it up. Put a jam knot right in front of the wing. So that's the wing right now. Now I'm going to take the same from the same spot. I'm gonna take some tailing pipe. Use the guard hairs as tail. So I take that. I measure that to be the length of the hook, and I'll bring this tail right to the bend. And tie that in. Take some of the loose fibers out. Now we have the tail on the wing. Now the guard hairs are really, the underfur is really hard. It can be a challenge to dub. Make sure you wet your fingers. Also, if you really want to, mix a little bit of muskrat fur in there. Small amounts. I think that's been my mantra for many years now. Small amounts. I don't even have to use wax, but if you have to, go right ahead. As you can see, the thread is actually showing through the fur. Hold the tail. Build the body. Just, like I said, very small amounts of fur is being used. Behind the wing. Now we want to get a little bit in front of the wing. Pull the wing back. Really jam that in. cross over, jam. Now we'll put a head, pull the wings to each side. Whip finish. And let me put the bobbin back. That's, as you can see, it'll float flush on the surface. When it gets wet, that red will show through. Um, I've heard people have used it for the Hendrickson hatch. He's used it for the Hendrickson hatch and everything else. And then other people have taken it and changed the color so that it would be a PMD or a sulfur. All right, the next one is his AuSable Wulff. What he did was he took the Wulff series from Lee Wulff and he adapted it to his stream. Still using a orange, a bright orange thread. The body itself is a either a cinnamon brown or a burnt orange, and he used possum, so using awesome possum, which is really good dubbing material. White calf tail, and the tail was woodchuck, and the hackle taken from how the Adams is with the brown and a grizzly mixed. So let me get that started. Once again, right behind the eye. I like to leave a little space behind the eye. Calf tail. Usually I try to get a thickness of about two times the thickness of the wire of the hook. So cut some calf tail. I even stacked it, lined it up, measure the shank, and about 1/3 away from the eye of the hook. Let me see if I have enough thickness. It doesn't look like it, but no, it's good. Wrap in front, put a dam of hair through there. At this point, we could trim this at an angle. Take your bodkin, split the hair in half, the wing in half. Run the thread through the middle of it, and then come from the other side. Hold the wing closer to you. And then what I like to do with hair, put a loose wrap at the base and then pull it towards the bend and it'll stand up. And I'll do the same thing, loose wrap around the base of the wing. Need more thread. This loose wrap up and through the middle. So now the wing is split and it has a nice pinch at the base. And now I'll bring my thread to the bend of the hook. Now I'll take some woodchuck, take all that underfur out, and I'll show you what I mean after I tie this in. And you don't need a lot. You just need a couple of fibers. Think about how the Adams is. It's got a brown and grizzly tail. So the woodchuck is basically the same markings, dark and light. So instead of using, hackle fibers, he went and picked woodchuck, measure it from these are just the guard hairs, that it's the shank of the hook. At the bend, pinch method, run it up. If you really want to have a little fun, put a wrap underneath the tail. It'll keep it straight up. So now the tail is done. Now just to go over what it is to do with the woodchuck. This is woodchuck. Just gonna run it right on the hide and cut right at the base of the hide. Now other flies, we want the guard. We want all the underfur, such as the llama. What we just do is hold the tips, and just stroke all that underfur out of there, just so I can just get the guard hairs. Hold it by there, and then I would just stack this much. All right. So now we got the hackle, the tail in place. Take a look at this stuff. It's got brown, black in there, rust orange. So as always, I use very little. Hold it against the thread. Go right on. It'll slide right up. All right, so that's a nice tight dubbing noodle. I'll hold the tail on the first couple of wraps so it doesn't slide off. And since the body is basically has an underbody shape that it's already tapered, now I left a little space in between the wing and the body. Now I'll take a grizzly and a brown hackle. This is the dull side of each. And I put the dull sides together. They face each other. So now this is going to get tied in perpendicular to the shank of the hook. I'm going to just let the thread catch the stems. And then I'm going to lock the stem in front. and then trim them off. I'm not a fan of just wrapping them both together, because the reason why I wrap them one at a time is because they're going to get mixed. So this one, I'm putting a 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to go through the top, and I'm going to finish this off with about 3 or 4 wraps in front of the wing. And then tie that off. Just go behind it. The weight of the bobbin will lock that in. Now I could just cut it. All right. Probably asking, why did I put them the dull sides facing each other? This one is going to be concave facing the bend. The other one's going to be concave facing the eye. When they are wrapped, the second one, you can consider that like a sweeper. I'm going to take all the stray barbs and pull them straight up and down. And this one, I'm not going to pass through the wings. I'm going to cover that spot that the brown didn't go through on the bottom. And now I will finish that one right off. Create a nice little head. And if there are any fibers or hairs that look a little unruly, you get right in there and trim them out of the way. Get a nice V. All right. Any questions? You okay, Gary? Good. Everybody else good? Okay, what's the body material on this fly? That fly I'm using is Australian possum. Color is burnt orange. You can use any color. I mean, not any dubbing material, but try to stay like towards the cinnamon brown air color or the burnt orange. Those are the two sizes, 2 colors that he mentions. The proportions, Alan. The tail on this fly is the same length as the shank of the hook. The wing is the same length as the shank of the hook. The wings are set at about 1/3 away from the eye of the hook. So if you break your hook into thirds, the first third is where the wing would be. Okay. The hackle is a gap and a half. Use a hackle gauge. It's a size 12. I use the size 12 hackles from the brown and the grizzly. Does that answer your question, Alan?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Whenever you see dry flies such as the Catskill versions, the wing is always as long as the shank of the hook. Always. That's if I as I'm writing this book on what a instructor should know, I go through proportions. The wing on Catskill dries is always the length of the hook. The tail on a dry fly is always the length of the hook. So that's what you're looking for. That's how we use the hook as a skeleton. Okay. Any other questions? Dave, you're going to get how many of them done by the end of the night?
None here.
That fly, the AuSable Wulff, I know many of my people, many of my friends fish it on a lot of the freestone streams in sizes 16s. And they keep saying it's like brown trout candy. So it's like a magnet. So give it a shot. It's not a bad fly. It's a really good looking fly. It's a high floating fly. All right.
Jerry, could you contrast for us the waters of the Adirondacks versus, say,
There's
the Catskills?
They're almost the same. They're both
Okay.
freestone streams. Just will be a little colder up there, not by much. The water is flowing from the mountains, just like in the Catskills, but their mountains are higher. During snow melt, that water is cold coming down. Insect life is a little rougher up there. The nymphs survive. Stonefly nymphs are a big thing. So, yeah, George, you are absolutely right. I thought the Catskills was treacherous. Yes, Alan. That's the whole thing about freestone streams is this pocket water. So your fly has to float on these pockets. So you want a high floating fly. Hence the AuSable Wulff. All right. Anything else? Wow. Dubbing. I think I'm going to go do a class on dubbing next month. I'm doing an in-person workshop in March. When I was teaching the beginners class a couple of weeks ago, one of the things I spotted was a lot of guys, a lot of the students were still not getting what I kept saying about small, and keeping it small. So I'm going to use the yellow stonefly as a way to explain dubbing. And also I want to get into what a double wing case is, how to weight a fly so it looks flat, and using biot tails. So I think that would be a good way to show some more techniques. And that fly will probably take about 45 minutes to complete. It's got a lot of steps in there with an over wing, also over body with it also. Okay. Anything else? All righty. Hope you enjoyed this. And I'll catch you next week. All right. I mean, next month. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Oh, you're welcome.